Hi everybody, Thomas Miller on the Fun Astrology Weekly Update. We have a busy, like spaghetti on the floor busy kind of New Year's Eve chart. And that's the focus of this week's video. So without further ado, let's just jump right on into this and take a look at it. And you can see in the middle here, we just have a quagmire of aspects. But as we break these down, it gets pretty fun. And we can see a clear picture for what I think 2025 is going to look like. So the first thing we're going to do is turn off all the blue lines, and let's just look at these squares and oppositions. These are the challenging aspects. These are the ones that are going to be tense. These are the ones that are going to stretch us a little bit. These are the ones that the collective is going to be reacting to. The first big one that is still very much in play is the Mars-Pluto opposition. So Mars and Pluto are at the same degree as we begin the new year. 1 degree, Aquarius for Pluto, Leo for Mars, and that tension has been with us since several weeks now since that aspect was first exact, and it's going to come back exact again with Mars moving backwards. As you can see, they're not that far apart. If you look at the little minute signs there, they're not that far. I believe it's next week when those two will reconjoin. But it doesn't matter the date because the energy is there. It's just constantly with us. And that's going to be with us all the way into the first part of next year, like March, April kind of time frame, before we finally escape and move past that energy. Now, adding to that, the next thing that we'll take a look at is this, what's called a T-square in astrology. So we have Jupiter on one side, Mercury on the other, and then Saturn up here at the top. And then you can see the lines are connecting all of that with a little pyramid-looking shape. Whoops, sorry about that, but you get the idea. So you can see Jupiter and Saturn in the sky together. They're in the western sky just after the sun goes down, and it's a great view of both of them up together. I was looking at it just the other day. And you're going to see these involved in the positive aspects when we bring the blue lines back. And this is what I'm saying is all of these planets are kind of tied together in both positive and challenging aspects. Now, Saturn and Jupiter, all right, remember, back to December 2020. That's the aspect that Ray Merriman has been talking about in the Forecast 2025 book, which I hope you have picked up, the audiobook version of that. You can get it from hightimelinebooks.com or MMAcycles.com, and it goes over all of the mundane information for next year. And Ray talks about this because this aspect back in 2020 was a conjunction, and now we are encountering the first real challenging aspect since that first conjunction, which began this cycle, this Jupiter-Saturn cycle that we are currently in. So you have two dynamics going on here. You have Jupiter in a sign that it doesn't feel comfortable in because, as we've been talking about on the podcast quite a bit, this opposition line connects it to Mercury, which is over there in Jupiter's territory, and Jupiter is over there in Mercury's territory, which is a positive thing. But we know that there have been some areas of expansion and exaggeration that Jupiter has magnified that are not positive. And people are wondering, well, wait a minute, Jupiter's in my sign. What's the problem? Well, the problem is it's not so happy in that sign. And it's in this square to Saturn. And for the rest of our lives, we are going to be experiencing, whenever Jupiter and Saturn conjoin, that conjunction is going to be in air signs. And that's why Ray Merriman has dubbed this the new era, AIRA. Now, the other dynamic that we add to this aspect is that Saturn is moving faster, obviously, than Neptune, and these two are going to come together and then move into the sign of Aries, and that's Ray's dubbed that the Aries vortex. These are great terminologies that he's come up with on this. And then when you throw into the mix the other sign changes, which includes Pluto, and then eventually Jupiter will be moving into Cancer, then we have covered all the outer planets moving, changing signs, and that's the thing that hasn't happened in basically recorded history. Now, there's one other little piece to this puzzle as we're sitting here on these red or more challenging aspects that I want to throw into the mix, and that is the north node of the moon, which right now is only 3 degrees away from Neptune, and the south node of the moon are going to be changing signs next Saturday, the 11th of January. So what will happen, because they always move backwards, is the south node of the moon is going to be in Virgo, and the north node of the moon is going to be in Pisces. Now, we talked about that configuration on the podcast quite a bit, and that has had the beginnings. I mean, when they moved in together, we were saying, watch out for war. And what did we get? We got it, double whammy of it. So what we're seeing now is going to be a more practical piece, I think, as especially the north node moves into Pisces. That's as different from Aries as night and day. So while Aries wants the conflict, Pisces is going to want the peace and the harmony. And Virgo brings a practicality to this. So even while we have this challenge of the Saturn-Jupiter square, where there could be all kinds of tension around this, and with Saturn moving toward Neptune, I think what's going to happen is a lot more of this truth stuff that's coming out right now is going to continue. But I think there's also going to be this, even though these are squares and it is tense and you can feel, and then throw the Mars-Pluto on top of it, that's extra powerful tension, big tension, magnified tension. Yet, with the nodes coming in there, I think we're going to see some kind of a desire for balance and harmony and peace and, hey, let's sit down and talk this out kind of thing. Mercury rules Virgo, remember, so there's the communication factor. And let's pick up on the positive side of this, what they call this mutual reception in astrology. It's Mercury and Jupiter in each other's signs. That has a positive element about it. And I think this is the tension that I think we're going to see, this constant pulling on the string all of next year. Because remember, what we're looking at in essence is the natal chart for 2025. Now, here are the positive aspects, the lighter, easier aspects, if you will, and we have two really, really good ones. First of all, your eyes probably have picked out this rectangle. That's called a mystic rectangle in astrology. It is the most favorable of, I think, probably, I mean, both of these configurations that we have in here are. But look at what's involved. And even I think this moon being right in there where it is super significant for the birth chart of 2025. But as I'm circling these, you're seeing exactly the same things that we saw before. The south node of the moon is on one corner. Well, that brings a real positive aspect to these changes. And even though it's sitting at 0 degrees Libra, that's going to make the old, which is the north node Aries, south node Libra, and the new moving into the directions that they're going to go. And remember, they're going to be counting down backwards. So when the sign change takes place next Saturday, the south node of the moon will be at 29 degrees Virgo, and the north node will be at 29 degrees Pisces. And we count backwards. So that's a real amplified position. And then this chart shows it best because we also have the north node in this trine to Pluto. Now, we've been talking quite a bit on here about all of these changes that are coming and how timelines are shifting and consciousness is rising and things are getting better and all of these things that we've been discussing. And this chart shows us a real clear path of that kind of change in consciousness as the north node leaves the sword of Aries for the peaceful pen, if you will, of Pisces. Let's journal, let's talk, let's develop peace treaties instead of documents or threats of war. I think that that's going to be a theme that could take a while to play out, obviously. These old patterns aren't going to die, and as this happens with the chart here, as 0 degrees as I'm talking about, is that the old energy is still very, very strong. And that's why I think maybe even this whole year becomes a year of transition. It may not happen. I mean, don't expect all of a sudden swords to start dropping on the ground. But I do think that there's going to be this increase in, hey, stop this. Let's work this out. Because we'll have about 18 months when they do change of these nodes in the different signs. So now you can kind of put the spin, as you could see. Well, okay, Saturn and Neptune coming together at 0 degrees Aries. Well, that's a lot of fire, that's a lot of horsepower, and that's going to first happen. They're going to stick their toe in there in the summer of basically the mid part of 2025, and then for good in 2026. You have Pluto and the moon together. I mean, talk about subconscious mind, talk about intuition, talk about the Netherland world connected to Neptune. This says to me that during 2025, we're clearly going to see things differently through more spiritual eyes. And then let's bring Mars in, this old Mars on the corner up here, which is opposite Pluto, but now it's in a mystic rectangle. So it's in a trine to Neptune. And Mars is in Leo. So I think there are going to be people stepping up, leaders stepping up into this public persona. Maybe not people that we even see on the stage currently. New leadership stepping into this who are willing to help change the narrative positively. And the South Node moving into Virgo, I think, is going to bring a practicality to the whole process. Remember, Virgo wants things perfect. And if Virgo doesn't get perfect, they get critical. So but I mean, we need some of that right now, don't we? Don't we need some criticism of what doesn't work, what obviously is just completely disconnected? And now we have the same thing. The only real change here is that this kite pattern brings Uranus into the picture. And so we know that sudden surprises and shock and awe, in fact, things that we just didn't see coming out of anywhere all of a sudden. And it also illustrates a shift, I think, to astrology, because this is in a very positive kite aspect. If we just take this line right here from Pluto and the moon, and that trine to Uranus, and then the two sextiles up here to Neptune, that's about as spiritual as you could connect in a chart. The only one missing is Jupiter, and if Jupiter was in Sagittarius, that would be a better display of that, but it's not, and so at least we have, I think, a dynamic shift here, so that when my podcast friend, Judy Diamond's friend's son called and said, "Hey, Mom, I got to know my birth time." Why? What's up? I can't make friends. He lived in San Diego. I can't make friends in San Diego until tell them my big three, my sun, moon, and rising sign. I need to know when I was born. It's like, I think all of a sudden we're going to be seeing that become prominent under this kind of an aspect, where that does start to move across the country. And astrology becomes a big conversation, especially among the young people. So you can see why I'm saying that I think this is a real positive time, and it's going to be a time where we have to pull apart the old structure. And that's why the same planets are stacked up on top of each other with the same kind of tensions, and yet there's the positive tension and the negative tension. And I think that's the way that this year is shaping up to play out. So that's really the gist of this. We have a couple of big things happening mostly on Thursday. And we have Mercury moving out of the shadow period Thursday, and Venus moves into Pisces, and that's going to be a big positive as well. So Venus getting into a sign that it's happy in. So we do have some things to celebrate this New Year's. I hope that you're going to be meditative in some ways, and don't let all the chaos and everything about the big transition take place. Remember, there is spiritual work to be done, and carve some time out for that would be my encouragement. Set the pace for your own self for this year. And you could put that chart, over your natal chart, and take a look at some of the things that we outlined there and compare that to your natal planets and see what kinds of things are going to be affecting you from what we just pulled out of that chart. I hope you have a great week and a happy new year, and we'll see you next year here on the Fun Astrology video podcast. Thanks for watching.